Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're not just diving into your typical story. We're going to take a fascinating look at the unseen, mathematical, and honestly, the emotional probabilities of our lives. It's basically a journey into how our mere existence ripples out into the world in ways we can barely even comprehend. And you know what? The whole shebang starts with a simple object lost at sea.
To kick things off, I really want to anchor us directly in the present moment with just a single number: 70. It has been exactly 70 years since a green soda bottle was tossed into the ocean. Now, just think about the sheer impossibility of what happened next. 90-year-old Arthur Fredericks, just wading in the Miami beach surf, found that exact same bottle bobbing right there in the waves. I mean, what are the odds?
So, Part 1, an impossible discovery. The ocean returns a memory.
Okay, let's dive right into this and picture the scene. It's a blindingly bright afternoon down in Miami Beach. 90-year-old Arthur wades into the surf, driven by this strange pull to retrieve a bobbing piece of green glass. He sits down heavily on a piece of bleached wood drift, and as he pries open the weathered cork, you can almost smell it, right? The scent of old paper and dried brine just drifts right out. He tips the bottle, completely and utterly astonished, to find two rolled sheets of parchment sliding right into his palm.
Which brings us to Part 2, a message to the void. Flashback to Washington State.
Now, we actually need to jump back in time to make sense of this first letter. Look at young Arthur here. He's just 20 years old, standing at the jagged, rain-swept edge of the Pacific Ocean. He's carrying a heavy heart, he's absolutely terrified of the future, and he's completely unsure of who he even is. In this intense moment of heavy-hearted existential dread, he just starts scribbling his deepest anxieties onto a scrap of parchment. He writes down this desperate hope for a meaningful life, basically crying out into the void to ask if anything he did would ever really matter. And then, just on a whim, he shoves it into an old soda bottle and flings it out into the Pacific waves.
Let's move along and see how this builds, because you really have to consider the incredible geographical and chronological journey this bottle took across the span of an entire human lifetime, literally an entire lifetime. In year 1, our 20-year-old Arthur throws the bottle into the ocean in Washington. Jump ahead to year 30, a complete stranger finds it in Oregon. And then, at year 70, the 90-year-old Arthur discovers it in Florida. The sheer mathematical impossibility of this bottle holding together, traversing the globe, and finding its way back to him, it presses against his chest like a physical weight.
And, think about what actually happened in the gap between that young boy's despair and the old man's discovery. Arthur lived a rich, full life. He survived a war, he built a career, he had a beautiful marriage to his late wife Martha, he raised 3 children, and he now has 7 grandchildren. The reality is he lived, he survived, and the 90-year-old man had ultimately found the very peace that the 20-year-old boy so desperately sought on that rainy cliff all those years ago.
Moving on to Part 3, The Stranger's Reply. A voice from Oregon.
So Arthur has just read his own frantic note, and he's stunned to his very core. But now he turns to the second completely unexpected piece of parchment. Now, what's really interesting about this is the physical contrast between the two letters. It brilliantly illustrates the shift from deep anxiety to profound hope. On the left, we've got Arthur's original note. Frantic, looping handwriting, the ink faded to a ghost gray over the decades. But look on the right. The stranger's note is on newer parchment, written in this elegant, sweeping cursive with vibrant, steady blue ink.
As Arthur reads this sweeping cursive, the bustling beach around him just seems to quiet down. The stranger reveals their story, writing that they actually found Arthur's bottle on a beach in Oregon 30 years prior. The stranger wrote, "I was going through the darkest winter of my life, ready to give up. But reading Arthur's raw honesty, his fears, and his quiet hope, it reminded the stranger that they weren't alone in their existential dread. Arthur's note literally saved him that day. No way, right? It's just incredible."
The stranger goes on to detail exactly what happened next, which we've broken down here into 4 steps. First off, the deeply grateful stranger kept the letter for decades, holding onto it as a lifeline while navigating the tides of their own life. Second, they got married and built a home. Third, they found the inner peace that young Arthur was originally looking for. And finally, before growing too old, they kept a promise to themselves, returning both Arthur's words and their own new message back to the sea. Just in case the universe wasn't quite done with them yet.
The letter concludes with a deeply profound message for the young man who threw that bottle. It reads, "If you are out there, young man, know this. Your life mattered before it even fully began. Trust the journey."
As Arthur reads these elegant words, the parchment blurs. Tears well up in his eyes and just spill over the deep valleys of his wrinkles. It's a truly powerful moment.
And that brings us to part 4, the ripple effect. The universe keeps a receipt. And this brilliantly illustrates something massive. Arthur realizes his existential dread hadn't been wasted at all. It was actually the salvation for a complete stranger years later. It's like the universe had kept the receipt of his existence. So the crucial point here is what we call the cosmic echo. It's the unseen, lifelong ripple effect our vulnerability and mere existence have on the world, and on strangers we may never ever meet. Zooming out from Arthur's specific story, this connects so deeply to the interconnectedness of all human lives. We all put energy, fears, and hopes out into the world, and we rarely get to see how they land. But Arthur? He got the exceedingly rare gift of seeing his echo return.
So Arthur knows exactly what he has to do. Carefully and reverently, he rolls both pieces of paper back up and slips them back into the green glass, pushing the cork in tightly to seal the miracle safely inside. He stands up on his aching 90-year-old joints and walks to the very edge of the water, where the foam is just licking his toes. Drawing his arm back with literally all the might his frame can muster, he hurls the bottle back into the ocean.
He watches the bottle bob, catching the light as it gets pulled away by the ebbing tide. A boy's fear has been released back into the deep, and a stranger's gratitude has been fully honored. Arthur smiles this sad, beautiful smile, full of longing for the past, sure, but completely at peace with the present. He turns his back to the sea and walks towards his hotel, his spirit so much lighter than it has been in years.
Which brings us to the end of this explainer, and to a question I really want to leave directly with you. Whose life might you be saving just by existing? It's a huge thought, isn't it? Your actions, your honesty, even your darkest fears cast a ripple out into the world. You have a cosmic echo that you can't yet see. Trust your journey. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.